China's parliament, the National People's Congress, has just approved a constitutional amendment to abolish presidential term limits. President Xi, already one of the most powerful Chinese leaders in decades, will now be able to rule indefinitely, perhaps for life.
Removing China's presidential term limits will have major consequences, of course, inside and outside the country. Our Matt Rivers joins us now live from Beijing. Matt, this has just happened. It's official. Well, why has the Communist Party decided to go along with this idea?
Well, there's a lot of different potential domestic political reasons for that, Natalie, but I think what you can see this as is really just a coronation of what critics would call a brand new dictatorship here in China, the likes of which we have not seen since the guy right behind me. That's, of course, Mao Zedong, the founder of Communist China. What you now have seen Xi Jinping do is really completely take over the government apparatus here in China, and really it started late last year during the 19th Party Congress, where Xi Jinping was reelected as General Secretary of the Communist Party, but also he had Xi Jinping thought, as it's formally known, written into the party constitution. And what analysts will tell you is that by doing that, that made him the most powerful Chinese political figure since Mao Zedong. And if you criticize Xi Jinping, well, then in essence, you're criticizing the Communist Party itself. So if you ask why these delegates here at the National People's Congress are going along with this, even if many of them perhaps have differing opinions as to whether this is a good thing or not, they're not really going to speak out, because the reality is that Xi Jinping is too powerful for that at this point. He is an incredibly powerful politician. He is now the head of the head of the Communist Party. He is the head of the military, and now he could be president for life if he so chooses. That means that China is basically now under one-man rule. It will follow Xi Jinping's vision for China. He views China as ascendant. He views China as perhaps competing with the United States in just about every arena imaginable over the next couple decades. And this abolishment of term limits just kind of formalizes or seals this deal that he has been able to accomplish in his first 5 years in office.
Yeah, and interesting, Matt, you talk about inwardly, some of the people that we see here, members of the Communist Party, may not be for this. But what about the people? China does not welcome dissent, but are there rumblings in the country about this country going backwards to one-man rule, like you mentioned, with past dictators?
Absolutely. I mean, this is not a monolithic society. I mean, people have differing opinions. Whether they can voice them publicly is certainly another story altogether. But yes, there is absolutely concern. I mean, we were speaking earlier today, actually, with one of the more prominent vocal critics in China, a former newspaper editor for a state-run newspaper, actually. And he is one of the few people who have spoken up and said that he thinks this is a terrible idea and that he doesn't want his children to look back at these days and not see him stand up for what he believes is a grave injustice here in China. So there is certainly a healthy amount of suspicion as to Xi Jinping's motives here. He says, or the state media say, it's really just all about making China a more strong country, but people would point to that and say, well, that's just an excuse for creating yet another dictatorship here in China. But whether there is dissent or not, the effect is that it's not public, because Xi Jinping is all-powerful at this point. The state is all-powerful, and there is no room for dissent. And I can guarantee you that right now, the CNN signal here in China is being blacked out. If you were staying in a hotel, for example, here in China, it would just be black, because anytime there is an open and honest conversation about whether Xi Jinping staying in power for life is actually a good thing for the world's second most important country, the government here just doesn't want to see that.
Yes, they certainly don't hesitate to black out media coverage, do they? And that certainly doesn't look like something that will change under Xi Jinping as he continues here. But what about the region, Matt? Does this have the region concerned?
Well, I think what other countries are going to be looking at this situation as is perhaps a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that you know who you're dealing with, and there is stable leadership here. You don't have to, if you're planning to be talking about China in 2025, you can pretty much bet that Xi Jinping is still going to be in power, barring some sort of unforeseen circumstance, so you can do some long-term planning. But if you are feeling a bit hesitant about China's vision, if you are feeling hesitant about his incredible political repression here domestically, if you are feeling hesitant about his military expansion in the South China Sea, if you are feeling hesitant about the terrible loans that China often puts out to developing countries in order to gain political influence there, then yes, you are looking at this development here and saying that's not a good thing. So there is good and bad to this if you're an international figure looking at dealing with China. But at least for planning purposes, you know that this guy is likely going to be around for a very long time.
And as we mentioned, this decision was made just moments ago there in Beijing. Our Matt Rivers for us. Appreciate it, Matt. Thanks.